Welcome everyone. Let's begin our lesson for today by going over the learning goals and success criteria. First, what are we learning? We're learning how to recognize independent and dependent variables and relate them back to your understanding of fixed and varying quantities, how to recognize the proper domain and range of various scenarios, and how to recognize the various mappings that can occur between domain and range. How are we learning it? Through the domain and range notes and the domain and range assignment. When can we use this information? To recognize all the possible outcomes of various scenarios, such as potential outcomes that would allow your favorite team to make the playoffs. How do you know you learned it? By getting a score of 4 on the domain and range assignment. Now let's take a look at our agenda for today. We will begin by going over the learning goals and success criteria. While we do that, you'll fill out your Get It Started. Once you've completed the Get It Started, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. After that, we'll go over the domain and range notes, and then I'll give you time to complete the domain and range assignment on Desmos. Once you've completed the assignment, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. At the end of class, we'll go back over our learning goals and success criteria while you fill out your Before You Go. Your only homework for tonight is to continue working on the reasoning with the relationship study guide and any complete assignments that you may have. Now let's take a look at the domain and range notes. The notes begin with the learning goals and success criteria. So just a reminder, there are two types of elements of a function. The first is the domain, and the domain represents the input or the starting values, and the range represents the output values or the things that the domain is mapped to. Now within that, there are different kinds of mappings. There are 4 different kinds of mapping. The first one is one-to-one, the second is one-to-many, the third is many-to-one, and the last one is many-to-many. Now, what does that look like? So one-to-one mappings mean that for every element in the domain, it maps to exactly 1 in the range, and it also works in the other way. For everyone in the range, there's exactly 1 in the domain that it maps to. So here we can see that this one maps to this one, and this one maps to this one. So in both the domain and range, I don't see where they map to 2 different places. So that's one-to-one mapping. One-to-many. So one-to-many means that there is an element in the domain that is mapping to many or multiple places in the domain. So one-to-many means that there's a point here in the domain that's mapping to many or multiple places in the range. So for instance, I have this one and it's mapping here and here. So this is one-to-many. So even though all the other elements are okay, if even one of them goes to multiple places, it becomes a one-to-many mapping. Okay, many-to-one. So many-to-one means that there are elements in the domain that map to exactly 1 in the range, but there are multiple spots in the domain that map to the same spot in the range. For instance, we have these 2 here, and they both go to this point in the range, so this is many-to-one. So many, meaning multiple in the domain, map to 1 spot in the range. The last one is many-to-many, and this means that there are multiples that go in both directions. So it's both many-to-one and one-to-many. So here we have this point here that's mapping to multiples here in the range. And we also have this one in the range that's mapping to multiples in the domain. So this is many-to-many. Now, determining whether something is a function or not. A function only exists when each member of the domain maps to exactly 1 member of the range. So, in order for something to be a function, it needs to be either one-to-one or many-to-one. Now, for it to not be a function, that means that something in the domain maps to multiple places in the range. So, in order for it to be not a function, it needs to be one-to-many or many-to-many. So let's look at an example here. We have the books in a library and the number of pages in each book. So notice there are no actual elements. We need to use our logic here. So the domain is the number of pages. The mapping, now we need to decide. So the question is it possible for multiple books to have the same number of pages? Well, yeah, we can have 2 books with the same number of pages. Is it possible, though, for a certain number of pages to belong to different books? Well, yes. So this becomes a one-to-many scenario, and we know that one to many means that it is not a function, because we can have a number of pages. Let's say this is 25 pages, and we could have 6 books that are 25 pages each. So it's one to many, and it is not a function. So our explanation would be several books may contain the same number of pages. So this is how you'll do your activity for today. Let's talk now about how to sign in to Desmos to complete your work. So what we're going to do is you're going to click on the link to go to the assignment, and it should take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And right here where it says sign in with Google, we're going to click there. It's going to pop up with our email accounts. You're going to click on your school email account, and it should already have you logged in because you should have already been logged in using Google Classroom. From there, I'm just going to click start the activity, and it will take me into the assignment and allow me to begin. So that's how you will log in to Desmos using Google. Let's take a look now at the domain and range assignment. The assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. If we scroll down, there's a link here to take you to the Desmos activity. Go ahead and click on that link, and it should take you to a page that looks like this. The assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. We'll go ahead and click next. Instructions. For each of the following scenarios, state the domain, show and state the mapping, and then decide if it's a function or not. Be sure to label your set and indicate the direction of the relation. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So we have pages and books. So the domain is the number of pages. Now we need to decide, does this or does this not represent a function? Well, we need to think about it, right? So is it possible for more than one book to have the same number of pages? Well, we know that that's possible, right? We could have 3 books that all have 20 pages each. So we know that this would be one to many, right? So this is not a function. So we would erase this part and have it say the scenario does not represent a function. The mapping we said was one to many. Now let's check to make sure, could it be many to many? So in the other direction, could we have a book that has 2 different numbers of pages? Well, we know that's not possible, right? A book either has 20 pages or 30 pages or some number of pages, but it can't have 2 different numbers of pages. So this would be just one to many. And how do we know? You're going to put into words what we just said, because it's possible for more than one book to have the same number of pages. So that's how we know that it is one to many. And then you'll do that for each of these. So you'll go ahead and answer that. So this one says cars on a street and assign license plates. So the plates are the domain. The mapping. So is it possible for more than one car to have the same plate? Well, we know that's not possible. So far it's one to one. Is it possible for a car to have more than one plate? No, it only has one plate, so this is a one-to-one function. So the mapping is one-to-one. Is this a function? Yes, so this does represent a function, so I erase this part. Then I go here and explain my reasoning. You're going to put into words what we just said. And you'll do that for each of the scenarios until you get to the end. Once you get to the end, we'll go ahead and go back to our Google form and click next. This will take you to your before you go. Go ahead and fill out your before you go and then submit your work on Google Classroom.